People keep asking me if I think that compounding of tirzepatide is going to go away entirely if this lawsuit that was recently filed by the Outsourcing Facilities Association, the OFA, representing the 503B compounding pharmacies against the FDA, and now Eli Lilly, who has joined the case, goes the way of the FDA rather than the OFA. But I think there's a nugget of information that keeps getting missed in the discourse about this whole drama around compounding of tirzepatide that I just want to raise for a moment. If I am reading the regulations correctly, and I believe I am, there is nothing inherently about tirzepatide that prevents it from being compounded, even if it comes off the FDA shortage list. And that's because the shortage list allows 503B compounding pharmacies to mass produce what are essentially virtual copies of Zepbound and Mounjaro, tirzepatide, in a compounded form. But compounding exists not just for the purpose of filling drug shortages, but it also exists for the purpose of creating custom versions of medications for individual patients who demonstrate a medical need for a compounded version of a medication. There's a variety of reasons why a medication might need to be compounded. That could include that patients have had a reaction to a particular inactive ingredient in a brand name medication, or that a particular dose of the medication or doses of the medication do not work for them and for their individual needs, or that they need a medication combined with more than one active ingredient because there is some additional resource that they need. And therefore, the medication in a format that they need as an individual is not available or accessible to them, and therefore the compounding pharmacy steps in and fills that individual prescription. However, tirzepatide would only be illegal, quote unquote, to compound if it was on a list of demonstrably difficult to compound medications that the FDA maintains. So at present, the owner of that patent has not demonstrated to the FDA that there is anything inherently about that medication that makes it demonstrably difficult to compound. Therefore, it is not illegal to compound tirzepatide. If the medication comes off the shortage list and the lawsuit is won by the FDA rather than the OFA, then the medication can't be produced en masse as a virtual copy of Zepbound or Mounjaro anymore, but the medication can be compounded to fulfill individual patient needs. So if somebody needs a different dose than is available commercially, or a different ingredient than is available commercially, or a different mix than is available commercially, then technically 503A compounding pharmacies can still fill that prescription and can produce compounded versions of tirzepatide as long as it is not a virtual identical copy of the brand name medication. So the big question remains is what is the appetite of the 503A compounding pharmacies to continue to produce compounded versions of tirzepatide to meet the individual needs of patients who receive prescriptions from licensed doctors or other providers who identify that they have a medical necessity. The only thing that would get in the way from 503A compounding pharmacies being able to continue to meet those individual needs of patients would be if they get scared away from doing so by a very wealthy pharmaceutical company that hires well-paid lawyers to threaten them to not continue to compound those medications. There's nothing inherently illegal about them compounding those medications for individual patients who have individual needs. Tirzepatide is not on the demonstrably difficult to compound list and therefore can be compounded by 503A pharmacies even if it is no longer on the FDA shortage list, as long as they are following those standards that I just described. So I just think that's an important factoid to throw into the mix here, because I think that there is a misperception, perhaps intentionally out there, that the FDA and the pharmaceutical company will be able to somehow shut down all forms of compounding of this medication should the litigation go their way and not the way of the 503B compounding pharmacies and the representation. Food for thought.